see if this is working or not. Okay. Right. Now we are good to go. I'll have to just update the links everywhere and we'll do that once we get there. Okay. Right. Solving issues with yeah, so solving issues with YouTube is never a fun thing to do live, but at least I think now we're good. I see people joining live. Drop me a line in the chat. Let me know that you're here despite all of this ridiculous technical ordeal that I profusely apologize for. I'll take a moment just to make sure that people are actually joining and that they see the message. And in the meantime, I'd really love to hear a little bit about why you're here. What brings you here today? Are you positioning your own personal brand? Are you working as a marketer in a company and doing this for a company of yours or a client of yours? Let me know in the chat. I'd love to hear that. This is not just a way to add some comments there and fill in this initial silence, but it will help me tailor what I'm talking about to your specific cases so that it's easier to follow. Thank you guys. I see comments coming in already in the chat. You are so kind. I get flustered whenever something like that happens, but I'm going to come to my senses in a sec. I'll just push a quick post to LinkedIn as well, because obviously if one platform has a problem, all of them do. So I'll just drop a line. Okay, right. See people dropping lines in the chat already. That's good. So yeah, tell me what brings you here. Tell me what are the brands that you're working on. Is it personal? Is it a company brand? What's the industry? Let me know. I love to hear that. And other than that, I see that we already have a bunch of people in, despite that quick mishap over here. So I'm not gonna take more of your time. I think that's been enough of technical issues that we want to focus on. So I'm jump straight in. Quick note before I start. Obviously, you are still getting a recording of this session. You are getting also a key takeaways recap of everything that you essentially hear today. It will be drafted in a format that's easier to follow, so that even if you are here live with me, you will have a nice, easy to go through reference document. And if you're watching this as a recording, you have both options, either watching the whole thing as it unfolds, reading through the key takeaways, doing both, whatever works for you. I'll be happy as long as you get the gist and most importantly, get value out of today. If something comes up while I'm talking, if you have any questions, any comments, drop them in the chat. I'll try to keep an eye on that as I go along. But obviously I'm a one-person show here, so it may take a minute for me to respond, but I have built in sort of natural breaks along the lines where I will answer questions. I'll make sure to cover as quickly as possible stuff that's pertinent to the topic I'm currently going through. But if you have a more general question, drop it in the chat as well. I will have ample time for comments at the end, where I can give you more about the reasoning or the tooling or really whatever is interesting for you. Thanks guys for being so active in the chat. That's great to know that there's another person at the end of this. So keep that up. I love seeing that energy. And yeah, I'm gonna share my screen. Let me allow so that everything can be shared. And there we go. We're off to the races and so on and so forth. Let me just update that. Okay, I think that this will actually show on the screen the most important bit that you need there. So I wanted to start off by quickly giving you a bit of a taste of where I was at when I was starting this whole thing about a month and a half ago now. So if you are anything like me, if you've been developing a brand, and it really doesn't matter if it's your own personal brand as I was going through, or if it's a corporate brand, what usually happens is that there comes a time when you look at your website and you're a little bit unhappy with what you're seeing. This happened for me a few months back when I was just looking at the words on the page, what's in there, what's the description like, and I really didn't like what was visible on the page. First off, I felt that it was very generic. I mean, I really loved this sentence in 2019 when I first wrote this page, but not anymore. And also, and I think that's the more important bit, and I'm sharing here a screen from the Wayback Machine because I wasn't smart enough to take screenshots of this version of the website, and currently it's on a completely different theme and it's a mess. So excuse the missing images in here. But as you can clearly see, there was a lot of information here on stuff that if you've known me for the past maybe year and a half or two, you probably would look at some of these lines and be like, huh, like conversion optimization, funnel building, that doesn't sound like what you do. And you'd be right, because it hasn't been the case for a really long while. And every time I look at this homepage or I look at my services page, which is this very now old schooly version of a long form sales letter that I wrote as an exam piece for Joanna Weeb's Copy Hackers conversion copywriting program, you feel like if you were in my place, you'd be like, oh geez, like this completely doesn't reflect first what I do, and second who I am as an expert now. And I knew this was the case, and I still didn't do anything about it, mainly for a couple of key reasons, and let's start there. The thing was that the words stopped matching the work, but the underlying reason for that and why I left it stay on the page for so long was the fact that I had doubts about how I should present myself publicly. I didn't know anymore what this brand of mine was all about and what it needed to convey. And the reason I stayed in this doubt land of sorts is because I was obviously working on a lot of client projects and they would take priority and all of this like usual stuff that we tell ourselves as experts. But I think the more important bit was the fact that I simply didn't, oops, that's for later. So I think the more important bit here was the fact that I just didn't have the time and the mental availability to sit down and think through what these pages needed to say. And the reason for that is that I didn't know what that headline should be. Didn't have my positioning figured out. So what essentially happened that finally pushed me to act was, first, I had a little bit more time to dedicate to this project because I had a gap in client work for about a month and a half, and I was like, now or never, we're doing this. And the other reason was that AI has made my work that much quicker, so it didn't feel like as big of a lift to go through all of the research that I wanted to go through in order to really base that new branding and new positioning on something specific rather than just a random hunch. So in a sense, AI was the unlock for getting me to act. But having the space was also a very nice addition to that. And now I am going to run you through what this whole process involved and how I went through it. So, as I mentioned in a post on LinkedIn the other day about this upcoming session, I didn't want to work on building a ton of Google Slides, and you see here just a few of them, which are points that I wanted to make sure that I don't forget to tell you. The rest of it is going to run straight in Claude Code. And this is the environment I'm using. So one thing that I want to mention at first as a caveat, I'm using Claude Code through a software called VS Code. VS Code is essentially just an interface wrapper where you have your full document folder with everything you're working on, and you have your Claude Code chat in the middle here. I've opened up just a blank one so that you are not distracted by any of my previous chats, but I'm going to show you a couple of chats and how I went through this process. And then you can also preview different files, and these are the building blocks of that positioning process that I went through. So I will, when I'm showing you the behind the scenes look, I will be showing this interface. And it may look a little bit weird at first, but I'm going to close off and open and change the sizing of these so you know where exactly to look. And I hope that it isn't going to be too new and disorienting if this is a new interface for you and you haven't seen it. But even if that's the case, no worries. This is literally the same old Claude chat that you're used to using. The reason I use Claude Code is that it allows for some more deep dive interactions that I'm probably gonna point to a couple of examples of that. But even if you're using just regular old chat, or even if you're using ChatGPT or Gemini as your main AI of use, on a daily basis, you can use the same process here. And as part of the recap that you'll get over email, you will also, you will also get access to some of the prompts that I'm going to show during the session. So this may look scary. Believe me, it isn't. We're going to jump in and tell you what's what. Right. So what I wanted to start with was actually a step that comes way, way before we even get to the nitty-gritty details of positioning. And this is a process I like to use when working with Claude, which is usually defined as priming the algorithm or some form of research. So as I was embarking on this journey, I knew that I will need a thorough process to go through. So I took a step back and thought, okay, before I even touch the chat interface here, what do I need to think about? What are the standard, positioning frameworks that I want to bring into this research? And how am I going to approach it? And this is probably one of those so important that you need to see it on a slide type of thing that I chose here. Before jumping into any of this, I chose the canon, meaning what are the frameworks that I already trust. I didn't let Claude just, define what positioning is for me or figure out how to approach it on its own. I had a very specific plan on which frameworks I wanted to use in this whole research. Then I let AI go wide, bringing in more sources and more ideas and additional directions. And I made sure that we were both on the same page on what we wanted to do here. And then another important thing on the process side of all of this is that the output of this work now lives inside all of the other content creation processes that I do. And I'm going to show you an example of that real quick. This is sort of the pinnacle of the work that we've done. And this is what I'm calling a knowledge block. So very simply put, a knowledge block is a document that's going to come into play whenever I'm asking Claude to do things for me. So if I'm asking it to write a new newsletter, if I'm asking it to help me write even like a LinkedIn post, if I'm asking it to work on a web page for my website, I'm going to make sure that it knows some of the general information that I'm looking for. And here on the side, you're probably not going to see it very clearly on this current resolution, but here is a list of these knowledge blocks that I usually use. So in here you have an AI slot blacklist of all the words that AI loves using that I don't let it use when writing for me. I have my brand voice guideline. I have my audience personas that are important for me to please when writing new content. And one of these knowledge blocks is the end result of all of this work that I did on positioning. So now every time I'm writing a new piece, it takes into account this positioning and messaging knowledge block, which is essentially just a summary of all the work that I'm going to share with you now. And it is taken into account every time I write a new piece, so that I know that all of my content writing stays on brand and is actually communicating that positioning that I want to present to the world. So this work is as much for me as it is an unlock for all of the next steps of content creation, of marketing work that I do in general. So this is quite important. Now, how did I approach this whole thing? I mentioned first that I had some frameworks in mind that I already trust and that I use. So I fed the AI these frameworks. And this is stuff that I've collected over the years and I know and I use on a daily basis and I trust. So for example, you're probably familiar with April Dunford. April is essentially the grand lady of positioning. She's written the book Obviously Awesome. I will share in the notes following the session a book summary that I've written on top of that book. But essentially, when you go to her website, she's kind enough to provide the templates from her book on positioning, and you can get them here. You can subscribe to her newsletter. She's awesome. You should read everything that she does. So I've downloaded this template and I use them in my daily work. So for example, here is one that I folded into that research. I was using her value points boilerplate, how she thinks about you have a target segment in mind, you have competitive alternatives that they reference, and here are the shortcomings of these existing solution, and here's the value that you bring to the table. So that's one example. This isn't going to be like a full-scale positioning masterclass, so I'm going to go through these quickly and highlight who I'm learning from most. The second brand that I definitely need to mention, this is Fletch PMM. Fletch is an agency that's focused on positioning and messaging for B2B SaaS brands. And they have this awesome positioning canvas that they go through. Again, I'm not going to go through all of it. I'm going to reference some parts as I'm going through my own research process, and I'm going to tell you more about it. And I'm going to link to this LinkedIn post that goes through the whole canvas in detail. They have a library reserved for members of their community, and in it I also am lucky enough to have access to a Figma version of that same messaging and positioning canvas that I can download and let AI fill in for me. But you can even do that with a screenshot from the public facing LinkedIn post, so that's going to be easy enough. Going through the next ones, I have my own messaging framework that I use with companies. I have a blog post about it, so I'm not going to go in detail here. I'll tell you more about it in a little bit later. But you can get my messaging framework as a Google Drive file and fill it in for yourself. And you see it essentially follows a similar idea as April Dunford's point on having the category frame of reference, which is your anchor, and the competitive alternatives and what you do differently compared to them. And then you have your own key value pillars that you're building with sample copy linked to these. So this goes a little bit beyond the what of positioning into the messaging side. So how are we talking about this? But it's essentially the same idea. Then also I've been using in the past Marty Neumeier's onlyness statement, which is this sample positioning statement that you can build for yourself. And here's a great example with Harley Davidson. Again, I'm just sharing with you like these frameworks, and you can definitely find a lot more on them as you go along. So as I was working with AI, I first told it, we'll be working on this project. I specifically want to work with these frameworks later on in our project. Keep that in mind as you're doing the research. But I also wanted it to add a little bit of additional context on its own. And this is where I usually use deep research. And I do deep research in a separate chat and then feed it into my current conversation with Claude. So just really quickly, if you haven't used deep research, I'm obviously a Claude girly, so I'm using that. I saw Xenia's question in the chat on the models and what models I'm using. I'm mainly using Claude. I'm usually using Opus. Now that we have Fable access, I might run a high ticket thing like positioning work through Fable rather than Opus, but I think Opus is sort of the gold middle ground between not having enough and then doing too much for a bajillion tokens like Fable does. So if I want to run a long session, I'll probably use Opus. So usually when I do a project like that, I first ask it to do some deep research for me. I'm going to share with you a sample of that question, but just to give you an idea of what deep research is, when you give the AI a question and you use the option, you will find it here called research in Claude, deep research in Gemini. Here's the interface just to familiarize you if you haven't used that before. Here's what that looks like. If you ask a question, I already have deep research selected. It's over here in the settings. And when you ask it your question, it doesn't just like give you an answer in the chat. It actually goes online and looks at a number of different sources. So for example, here we have research from Gemini, and you can see like the number of sources that it looked at. You can see the same in Claude. So Claude provides you an artifact, which is essentially the same thing. And you can see here, it referenced 234 sources to create that whole thing. So I will open up a chat, open up deep research and say, let's research this topic. And here's what I mean by that. Here's a sample prompt that you can use, and I'm actually gonna jump in here a little bit deeper. So for deep research, there's a very cool framework called the Casino framework, which is an acronym of context, audience, scope, intent, narrator, and outcome. I'll take you through each one now. And this gives you a very structured way to ask for a detailed report, making sure that what you get out of it in the end is going to be helpful. So here's an example of that Casino framework type of question that I asked my AI to run that deep research report. I want to run a deep research report project on how positioning and differentiation actually work for solo service consultants, where the person is the product rather than a company, or a product being the thing you position. I'm about to reposition my own brand as a solo expert, and I want that expert grounding in place before I look at my own positioning. So this is the context. I'm telling it, this is what we're researching today. This is the reason why I'm asking. Then I give it the audience. This research report will be used in an LLM project where we'll dive deeper into my current positioning, analyze it, bring in voice of customer data, and synthesize all of it into new positioning statements. So the research is as much for the AI sidekick that will be extracting and looking for the information as it is for me while I do the positioning work. That AI needs clear context and how on how positioning is done well. So this is the audience. Then I give it the scope. I tell it, I want you to research these awesome people whose frameworks I'm going to use anyway, but you can expand beyond these sources if you find something relevant and trustworthy. I want you to stay in B2B, high consideration, high trust purchases, and in solo or very small service firms rather than enterprise product marketing. So I'm giving it the details on what type of positioning I'm specifically interested in to make sure that it doesn't give me like, you need a house of brands like Coca-Cola does. I mean, sure, like what do I do with that as a solo expert? This is going to be the reference document for the whole positioning project. Its job is to be a quality bar and to add context. It's a way to grade the output against the standards that the experts set. This is the intent, how I'm going to use this report this is important because if you tell it this is going to be adding context, it knows to give you a lot more detail. If you tell it this is going to be a quality bar type of thing and you're going to measure results against it, it knows to give you specific points that your output needs to clear in order to be in line with all of this. And then I tell it how to write the report. Be specific, be direct. I want you to check the primary sources, not just retell stuff that other people have said about them online. I want you to highlight anywhere you're referring any meaning rather than reporting what the experts have actually said, so that it doesn't start hallucinating solutions that someone, let's say April Dunford, had in mind when in fact she never said such a thing. And then the outcome, you're telling it what you need as an end case. I want to cover how positioning should be done, structured specifically for the solo practitioner. I'm repeating a little bit of myself from the previous sections because I really want to make sure that it knows what it needs to do. And I'm also telling it what it shouldn't concern itself with. Like, since this report will be used by AI, length isn't an issue, make it as detailed as you can, focus on facts, etc., etc. So when you have that, what I usually like doing, and it very much depends on whether or not you're using more than one AI. In theory, you can just do one deep research report like that and call it a day. I've actually run this both through Claude and through deep research in Gemini, Google's AI. And when I started working on my own positioning, I fed these two reports in my chat and told Claude to take into account all the information that's in there in order to have very good grounding on what we're talking about when positioning. Big caveat, these reports usually come up at like 16 to 25 pages. So you don't need to read the whole thing, just skim through and make sure that it's actually covering what you need it to cover. If not, you can always go back to your deep research chat and say, oh, you actually focused on this and not that, and I'd rather want you to think through these specific points, you know. So I let these research reports run in the background, and then I start my chat for doing the positioning work. To do that, I still use like a grounding entry point to make sure that whatever we're talking about next, the AI knows exactly what we're doing and why we're doing it, and it actually has thought through the issue at hand on its own. So here's what my grounding in this case looks like. You're an experienced positioning and brand differentiation strategist, so I'm giving it a little bit of a role. I'm telling it it helps consultants, founders, and small service firms work out what they actually stand for and how to say it. Then I say something. The reason this sentence is in here is to give it more jargon from that same area so that it starts doing these semantic connections, because as you all already know, AI is essentially just a very complicated calculator, and if you say apple, it's going to continue listing fruits, for example. And if you start telling it stuff like frame of reference, category choice, jobs to be done, message mining, voice of customer, onlyness statements, point of view and self-selecting clients, it now starts making this sort of mind map of what we're diving into, and it will be way better prepared to answer your questions in the future. So I give it a little bit of context on what we're working on right now. We'll be working on helping reposition my own brand. I'm this kind of person, just a very short sentence so that I also don't, prime it a ton with information still. And I ask it to answer a couple of short questions. The reason for these is exactly the same as the reason for the deep research report. I wanted to start building, start warming up, if you will, to make sure that it knows what we're talking about and how we're going in there. So once it answers that and I don't really read the whole thing, I tell it, okay, perfect. Here are the 2 deep research reports that I've done already through the other chats. read through those as well so you have full context on what positioning work we're doing. I know that's a lot of preparation before you start, but for a project as important as this, I really wanted to make sure that it knows exactly what we're talking about. So once I've gone through all of this, I made sure to explain to it what are the steps that we will be taking next. And again, you will get access to this whole document and I'll take you through it. I've just taken out literal like sections from my chats to highlight so you can see how that back and forth is happening. I don't think it's pertinent to show you like what it replied to me in the deep research report and sit here and read 16 pages, but I think knowing how to formulate the prompt is important. So I wanted to go through that first. So this is where I started the actual process. And to get into this, I didn't want it to just quickly answer what would make the most sense. I wanted to be very grounded in research. And since I have that experience already, I gave it existing information about my own brand. Now, if your brand is just starting out, and you don't have that information available at hand, or you don't have any pre-existing client chats or something like that to hand to it, you don't need to go about it that way. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples in a second, but let me tell you first what I asked it to do. I asked it to go through a bunch of different sources and to get information out of all of them. So here's the actual process that we ran through. Just let me open it up real quick. Right, so here's what we are looking at here. And I'm gonna close this off as much as possible so the focus is here on the right hand side. These are all the steps that we took. I first asked it to look at my website and to look at the existing information. I already told it at this point, my positioning is out of date. You are not going to find the relevant information in there, but I want you to take into account how I'm currently presenting myself and my services, what types of courses I'm selling, just so I don't have to tell you all of this again. Then I asked it to check out my LinkedIn profile where there's more information than what's listed on my website, particularly the experience section, some of the recommendations that I have, so that it starts building up a mental picture of where I'm coming from as an expert and what I've been working on in the past. Now, this is where the fun bit starts. I asked it to go into Google Drive, and you can do that very easily with a connector in Claude. Be it Claude Code or just the simple Claude Cowork interface on the front-facing side. You don't need to write any code for this. It's just super simple. And even if I'm glossing over the technical details here, ask a question in the chat if you need some specific guidance on this. And frankly, it's as easy as opening up a new chat in Claude and saying, hey, I want to connect my Google Drive. How do I do that? And it's going to tell you everything. So no worries about that. It's super easy. If I can do it, so can you. So looking at that Drive folder, I wanted it to go through my freelance projects and what I've been working on in the past. Now, obviously, you need to exercise caution here if there's sensitive client information in there, if there's stuff that you signed an NDA form for, you're gonna skip part of this step or be very, very specific about what it can and cannot read. So, that part and the legal requirements when working with clients comes first. So keep that in mind when doing this. So essentially what I wanted it to do is look at the projects I've done in the past, look at the types of deliverables I give people so that it has a clearer picture, not just what I'm saying that my services are, but what I've actually delivered to clients. Then to understand how I position my services, I gave it access to my Google Drive folder with initial proposals. So this is the proposal that I sent to a new client before we actually start working together. And I wanted it to go through everything it had access to since 2018 up to now, and understand what are the types of proposals. And I have a little bit of a caveat here. When you're giving it access to all of these different sources of information, you need to be very specific about trying to get out of them. So if you look at that note that I shared, here I'm telling it for the client-facing proposals, I want to build an offer map that includes like what's included in each offer and what the pricing looks like. So tell it what you want out of this, why you're giving it access to some particular source of information and what you want to get out of it. For Gmail threads, I'm going to get to that in a second. And for my Growth Mentor reviews, I was specifically interested in voice of customer data and information like specific quotes that I can use for testimonials on my website. So, be specific about this. And also, even in a single sort of category of sources as the freelance projects and my client-facing proposals, you will have a different approach to both of these. So for my case, like it had access to 89 total proposals since, that's actually a mistake, since 2018, since I started sort of sending proposals before I officially became a freelancer, all the way to 2026. And this is sort of like an archaeology type of process. What did I sell in the past? What am I currently selling? What's the drift between those? What are the types of services that I'm no longer providing? What are the ones that I've worked on over the years and I have a lot of experience with? I'm being specific on like what I'm looking for here. And then I told it, okay, like out of all of these 89 proposals, obviously not all of them resulted in projects that have actually started being live. I told it, out of these key clients that I specifically mentioned by name here, I want to look at the work I've done for them because they were the most exciting projects I worked on or the ones that paid the best, if that's your specific criteria on what you want more of. Or the types of projects that are most closely linked to what I want to continue focusing on as an expert. In your case, if you're doing this for a B2B brand, that might look at something like, go through HubSpot and look at our win-loss analysis. Or if you're just a B2C product brand, you may say, go look at our customer reviews and look at what's the scenario, what's the situation for these people when they come to buy our product, what do they expect from it and what they get out of it in return. Like there's a lot of different approaches here, and if you share in the chat your specific situation, I may give you a couple of more specific examples, so feel free to do that. The highlight on this one is, give it a brief on what you wanted to get out of any one of these sources. So looking at the rest of the ones that I specifically went through, so these were the client deep dives. These are like my highest priority type of projects that I want more of. Then I asked it for these 11 clients to go through my Gmail correspondence and look for voice of customer data, stuff that I can then tell a client, hey, like when we were chatting over here, you said this, could we spin this off into a testimonial on my website? Would you be okay with me referencing your brand there and being visible? And then I also asked it to go through my Growth Mentor reviews. Growth Mentor, really quickly, is a platform where mentors like me donate time to mentees who are in all different stages of a business and are looking at different things. And then they leave reviews for you as a mentor. So I have 288 reviews from sessions there. I asked it to take all these out and collect them into a CSV file, which you can see over here. And then I asked it to write a recap of all of these sessions. Well, not every single one individually, but look for patterns and what's being said most often. And then I also asked it to go through my existing content from my Marketing Matters newsletter and my blog posts to understand my specific approach to marketing, my points of view, what are the content pillars and the topics that I cover again and again. So a few sort of important caveats for all of this. One thing that it did as soon as it started going through all of these research stages, and just for practical points, this whole research plan I gave to Claude Code in one message, and then it built up its own sort of short to-do list to go through every single source and fetch me the information that I wanted it to get. So in Claude Code or Claude Cowork, you can get very complex step-by-step processes, and Claude is just going to follow that for you and not lose its way midway through, which is the reason why I use Code or Cowork and not just the standard Claude chat. So when I gave it all of this, it started going through the different sources, started asking some questions, and I also told it for each resource to write a note in a file. And this is, I have it screenshotted here because I felt it's going to be easier to see. Here is all of the research that we ran through. We have one note for the website information, one from my LinkedIn profile, one for the whole of the proposals that I've done in the past, one per proposal, and then client information for these 11 clients where I wanted a deep dive, the newsletter points of view and my blog points of view, etc., etc. So it went through a lot of information there. And then when we went to synthesis, it created a bunch of other documents that I'll take you through in a second. So one key point here is that I asked it to do the research, but as it was doing the research, it immediately started jumping to conclusions. So even after going through my website, which I told it is all the information and it's not actually visible, I told it to just look at it for information. As soon as it finished off reviewing my website, it was like, oh, like, and here's what your positioning should look like based on this website information. And I'm like, hold your horses, mate. I want you to first go through all of the research documentation before getting into hypotheses about my positioning. And here's where you have these rules that I mentioned here. Hold every positioning hypothesis neutral until all sources are done. Don't just jump into creating my positioning for me as you're like on step 2 of that whole bajillion of sources that you need to review. And the other point that I mentioned when I was doing that, obviously, if you're looking at like 7 years of data, there's going to be drift. So I told it to make sure that more recent work and more recent sources are weighted more heavily. Meaning that an offer from 2019 with a random deliverable that I only proposed once to a potential client isn't going to make it into my long-term offer map. It's actually gonna stay in there. So like, I was like, you know, stay there. So in terms of these specific steps that we went to, this is obviously a very sort of heavy duty research, especially if you have as much information as I do here. And before I finish off that whole research phase, I wanted to give you a couple of examples. Obviously, your sources and your report files from your research are going to look different, but this is what I came up with. So for example, when I asked it to create the recap of the Growth Mentor reviews, here's what it came back with, just so you can see a sample report here. It gave me the sort of common points that people usually mention being actionable in my feedback, being specific, being helpful, friendly, warm, approachable. These are things that ended up making it into my final positioning. And the other thing that I asked it to do here is to give me quotes that I can use as proof on my website. Since these reviews are public, I can just take them and already show them on my website very easily. So that doesn't require like a follow-up approval, which is a great source for me. So I asked it to take out the information and record it for the next phase of our research. Here's an example of a client file, and in my client folder there I did that same client file, sort of client review, with a separate client file for all these 11 deep dives that I did. It first starts off with a couple of notes on what we were doing, and then it goes into the details about what was done, what we were actually working on, what were deliverables, what are the proofs and outcomes, a sample testimonial that I can use here. This was taken directly from an email, I think, that we exchanged at an earlier point. And then it gave me positioning relevant takeaways for each of these clients. So at the end of this whole thing, I was very ready to dive into synthesis based on existing information, rather than just making an assumption and putting my finger in the air and saying this is what I want my positioning to look like. So once this was done, I was gonna go into the actual synthesis and building that positioning. And one important caveat here from the specific point of view, this whole process is very research intensive, and if you have used AI in any shape or form, really, you run into an important issue, which is the context window. If you run a long session with a lot of back and forth, at a certain point you start running out of context. The context being just all of these individual exchanges that you've had with the AI. When that happens, the AI summarizes the conversation for itself. So it sort of tells itself, here are the highlights of what we've done so far. We're going to continue. And I'm going to continue based on this short recap, as if I know everything that we've said before, which it actually doesn't. Essentially, when it summarizes the context, it starts from a completely new position. It doesn't remember everything from before. It just looks at that summary note and says, oh, okay, so this is roughly what we did so far. When that time comes, you don't really have information on what was kept and what was dropped. So to be proactive when you're working on a long form project like this, you need to make sure before that time comes, before you run out of your context window, to write down the important things to a file, so that you can then tell it, access this file and read through what we've done so far, and you actually know what's in the file. So this is something that I asked it to do, because at the end of our research, it was very close to hitting that context window being full. And it was going to start from step one. So all of that prep work that I've done, it reading the deep research reports, it answering questions, our back and forth, it would have lost that. So I asked it, hey, can you record three separate notes, so that when we run out of context, you actually know what's going on. And here's what these look like. The first was a process note. So this is a whole overview of the process that we're going through in this whole positioning point. It first recapped what we were doing in terms of positioning work, why there were peculiarities about solo services in B2B, the way I am. So this is stuff that we had already discussed and it knew, but it would have forgotten unless written to a separate note. I asked it to record the common mistakes. I asked it to record a quick overview of how this applies to my work based on stuff we've already discussed in the chat. What the actual process was, so what we've gone through, so that it knows exactly what all of these files that we have in the research phase are there, and what are the rules that I already mentioned here to you. The recency weighting, making sure that stuff that comes from more recent times is more important, making sure that while it's doing research, it doesn't actually lock any ideas before I say so, and so on and so forth. Then it also recorded a knowledge note, which is all of that research, the deep research reports, the discussion we've had, all the information that it already had collected on me. It sort of recorded all of that in a short overview. So it had who I am and what I do, the types of offers that I have, then the buyers that I'm working with. All of this is like the important sort of bit. Then the proof points that we had already collected, and so on. So everything that it had already done, we encoded in a short note. And then the other thing that I asked it to do was record a separate note where all of my input that's not currently part of the research steps, but that I've told it as we were doing this, is also recorded in there. And this note kept growing as we went through the next step. So whenever I told it, no, this isn't important, that's more important, or when I told it, no, this isn't the type of audience that I'm after, this is the type of buyer that I'm looking for, or when I told it, no, you're jumping to a conclusion too early, reserve judgment for later, all of this got recorded in this note. So it is, and I'm seeing here, whoop, if we do that, I think it's going to be easier for you guys to read. So all of this was stuff that it would have lost unless we had it. And I saw in the chat the question about like, how do we know when we're running out of context? And thanks to Xenia, you have that answered already. It's a little circle that pops up in your chat window. I can obviously show you in VS Code, but if you're not using that same interface, it's not going to be this similar. At a certain point over here, I mean, in Claude Chat, it's essentially the same. It's a little orange circle that starts showing up over here, and it starts filling up gradually. It happens after you've hit more than, I think it's 50 or 55% of your context window. And as soon as you hit 100%, it is going to compress the conversation and lose all of that pre-existing information. So that's what it is. So yeah, this was an important step to lock all of the process and the knowledge before we reach this point. But up to now, we already had our research essentially done. And we were ready to actually start synthesizing the information. Let me just check real quick on what I need to show you next. Right, so before we got into the actual positioning work and how we communicate what we want to communicate, I had to figure out what I'm selling. So this sounds a little bit weird, probably, but as I mentioned, the offers that I've done for clients were changing all the time. At certain points, I offered services that I wasn't offering anymore, and I was like, okay, like we need to figure out what we are currently offering. So I asked it to create this offer map that essentially went through all of the individual types of services that I'm offering. So the three main pillars, which you'll already see on my website, will be messaging design, building a content engine, so the whole content planning and content operations behind it, and then marketing ops and AI enablement, which is something new that I've been doing over the past couple of years, but we haven't been doing too much of it. It recorded what's the typical price bandwidth for that, how it differs between when I'm working with corporate brands and when I'm working with experts on personal brands. It recorded what are the different delivery tiers, done for you, completely bespoke work versus done with you work, where you are doing as much of the work yourself as I am helping you through that. And then done by you stuff, which is my courses and monthly coaching. So at this point, that fog that I had at the start started clarifying bit by bit. And I was like, okay, like we're getting somewhere. We now have a clear idea on what we're doing, which we haven't had for a really long time. So now I can, productize all of this. I can be more specific about the offers. I can create templated proposal slides for new client intake. And this is helping a ton at each step already. The more important bit, obviously, was building the messaging that is going to carry all of this information about who I am and what I do and what I offer to clients. And the way we did that was through all of these individual templates that I mentioned earlier. So one thing is that having these templates made it easy to think through specific questions about my positioning and making sure that this is all covered in a way that makes sense, in a way that's structured, in a way that actually leads to a next step, which is bringing all of this on my website, on my LinkedIn profile, and everything where I present myself. So using a template was super helpful for that reason. Now, which templates you use? You already saw that I've done a bunch of them. And as you can see here, I have my messaging framework. I have Fletch PMM canvases. I have my April Dunford positioning canvas. I have Louis Grenier's Stand the Fuck Out methodology filled in here. And you don't necessarily need to do all of them. I did them almost to test out the different frameworks on myself and know when I'm working with a client which one to propose we use. But the reason for that was that every one of them would give me a little bit of a different point of view. So before I sort of give you a proper idea of what I used from each one on my website, I want to show you an example of how I did that in the end. So and I'm going to get all of these a little bit smaller so that you see them next to my face as I'm going through all the details. So here's a simple way in which, having done that research, filling in the template becomes that much easier. The messaging framework that I personally use in my daily work with clients looks something like that. I already showed it for a sec there. Let's see, here we go. This is the one which you see on my own website. It's explained in a lot of detail here, so you'll be able to review that later. And here's what that template looks like. You have the market category frame of reference. You have competitive alternatives. So what are the other solutions that people are looking for if they are a potential client of yours, and how do you differentiate against them? What are the key value pillars? So what do you provide as differentiated value from others? And then when you have your key pillars listed out one by one, combining all of that information into short, succinct versions of your brand positioning in a one-liner, a 50-word version, and a 100-word version. The cool thing is that this may sound difficult to build up, but if you've done the research phase, you will have everything that you need to do that. And then it becomes a simple process. Here's an example of that prompt. Based on all the research that we've collected so far, I want you to fill in the messaging framework for my brand using the attached template. And I gave it access to that Google spreadsheet that you saw. I want to take it step by step. I first want to think through the market category and the frame of reference. I then want to do the competitive alternatives and how we differentiate against each one. And then we want to propose the key value pillars. So first off, you propose what these pillars are so that we can have a back and forth and decide which ones make sense and which ones don't. And then you can write the detailed copy for them. And then finally, we're going to have the brand positioning and messaging in the one-liner, 50-word and 100-word boilerplate. I told it here that I don't want a pretty version in Google Sheets because during this back and forth, when we're actually, working on a draft, because everything that AI is going to give you is going to be a draft. Don't think that I just gave it that prompt and it wrote something and I was like, perfect, we're done. This was just the first step, and we had a lot of actual back and forth, and I ended up rewriting parts of this when we were close enough, but not quite as close as I wanted it to be. So all of this work still happens in Claude Code in the Markdown format here. And only after I was completely done, I would have moved it back to Google Sheets to have like a pretty version that I can reference easily. But the thing is, I'm by this point so used to working with AI and Markdown files that I just left it in a Markdown file. So here's exactly what that looks like. Here's that messaging framework, and you have the market category frame of reference, which is essentially a consultant. I was very unhappy that I had to think of myself as a consultant because I think that there's a lot of negative connotations with that whole idea, but this is what people are looking for at the end of the day, and I have to be present where people are looking for it. And that's the only reason why you need a market category, to serve as an anchor on what you do in the minds of people. So, like it or not, I'm a consultant. Then we looked at the competitive alternatives. And here, a key point, if you're working on a personal brand or if you're working in a field that's very fragmented and there are a lot of competitors, you don't need to list here every single competitor by name. You can work in categories, and for personal brands, that's most usually the case. I'm not going to list every other freelance marketer in the world and find a way to differentiate against them. I'm going to think about broad categories. So for example, how am I positioning myself as an alternative solution to hiring a marketing agency? Well, I work directly with the client. I'm doing all the work rather than an intern doing it once the agency has won the deal and all the art directors and heavy hitters are out of the way. So this is a key way to differentiate against an agency. How do I differentiate against other consultants? Here's the way to do that. This is the way you can do this without losing your mind. If there are a couple of very prominent alternatives in your space, you can list them here and think about a differentiation strategy against every single one, but you don't need to have every single brand listed here. And one other caveat that I always mention when talking about competitive alternatives, doing nothing or hiring an intern to do it and just throwing more warm bodies at the problem is as much as a valid solution as everything else. So you need to keep in mind that this is not making the choice is as much a potential decision that your potential client can make as hiring someone else or hiring you. So that's sort of an important bit that I wanted to highlight here. And then we worked on the actual brand value pillars. Again, for time's sake, we're not going to go through all of these. And I'm also not going to go through all of the other frameworks that I mentioned. I have the Fletch PMM, positioning canvas filled in 6 alternative variations. I have Louis Grenier's Stand the Fuck Out canvas filled in here as well. This comes with Louis' book as a separate downloadable material. So if you get the book, get that as well. It's worth reading, especially if you're a solopreneur, because differentiation is the name of the game for us and we need that. But I think the more important thing is how all of this came to live on my website. So the one thing that I sort of ended up with at the end is a sentence that you're going to start seeing on my site. And this is the fact that I help brands get clear on what they do, get consistent in saying it the same way, and carry that positioning through their content. And this idea of clear, consistent, and carry through content is what started appearing on my website. This didn't come from the AI just thinking of a cutesy phrase to give me. It happened after rigorous research, and I have the receipts to prove that this is exactly what I'm doing for clients. It can be very easy for someone to try to say that, but if they need to prove it, they'll be in some hot water, and I can actually prove that. And this is sort of the hallmark of good copy living on your website, is stuff that you can prove and that's uniquely yours. So you see that on my homepage now. You see that here too. Get clear on what they stand for and carry it through everything they publish. Little bit of a different text, same flavor. You see it on my service page. Clear, consistent, carried through your content. And you see it also on other spaces where I'm present. For example, on LinkedIn, we have that same idea here. I get complex brands clear on what they stand for, then carry it through their content. And you have it in my experience section here as well. So once I had all of the synthesis and I have gone through the different exercises, these elements started appearing publicly. You will see in the copy everywhere information like this. So for example, if I'm thinking about the alternatives, a key thing is that I do all that senior marketer work myself. So this was one of the differentiations, especially against hiring an agency, that I wanted to highlight on my website. So you see it in the writing here. One other thing that I especially like, I mentioned Louis Grenier, and this is his website, stfo.io. If you haven't heard about Louis, you're definitely gonna have a blast. He's not everyone's cup of tea, but he's very much different from anyone else, and he's going to help you stand out as well. So he has a book called Stand the Fuck Out, and in it, he talks about something he calls spices. So what are those interesting bits that creatively highlight what you're never compromising on? So as I was thinking through my spices, as he calls it, I decided to put them on my about page. And this is what I can say for myself. I'm obsessively strategic. I'm stubbornly hands-on. I do the work even if someone else can do it. I just enjoy it. I'm insistent on letting go. I never try to stay with a client longer than they need me on their team. And I'm not bothered by the algorithm. I'm not trying to go viral with the content that we create. I'm trying to create a long-term relationship that actually pays off. So I'm giving you these examples not to sort of, highlight my own positioning in front of you and ask you to become a client, although if you want to, you can. I'm highlighting this to show you how we go from having all of these individual canvases and information in Claude Code, and then how does that come up on the website. And one thing that I did here is I have a chat that's going to be sort of exemplary of what I did. And this is the about page that I created. And you can see here very shortly the prompt that I used. I'm using a skill that I've developed for myself called Write Website Page. And this is something that I've trained on existing content creation best practices and copywriting best practices. I'm not going to dive into that because we won't have the time for it, but it is something that I can share with you afterwards if you want. And this is all of the input that I had to give the AI after we've gone through all the hard work of finalizing the positioning. I'm telling it, I want you to start working on the about page of my website, review the existing page at vochanova.me/about, read the, I had created a short architecture document saying like what each page should include because I was doing a rewrite of the whole website and I didn't want the same stuff mentioned all across of it. There were the right places where we wanted to say the right things. So even if you disregard this, I told it, look at the existing page, review the synthesis documents in my docs positioning folder, which is the one you already saw over here. This is the one where you have all these insights. And then I said, also look at the personas that I have, which is another knowledge block. I talked about knowledge blocks at the start. Here you have the personas. And once you have that full picture, ask me any follow-up questions you need answered. And only then, if you have everything cleared, start to write. And it started writing the page. Obviously, as you will see here, let me open up that folder. For the about page, we have 7 different drafts before arriving at a version that I felt was close enough to the end that I then took over to WordPress and completely rewrote on my own because obviously I had issues with some of the language there and some of the style. But this was way, way faster than doing it from scratch anyway. And I have now the information updated on all the pages on my website. One other key thing that I did at the end, once I had the drafts, even before pushing that to the live website, and then I did it once after all the information was already on the site, I asked the AI to review, let me scroll to the start here. I asked it to review all of the individual pages and look for inconsistencies. So I told it, I've been doing this substantial work restructuring my website. I want you to make sure that the content across all of these pages is aligned and there are no contradicting messages. Familiarize yourself with all of the documents in our positioning folder. Pull up my brand voice guideline and the AI slot blacklist, which are these 2 knowledge blocks that I mentioned, and then look at the output websites folder for the final version of each page and look specifically for any issues with the voice and any issues with the information there. So let me, I'll just have to make this a little bit smaller so I can actually show you the rest. There we go. So I gave it the information. I think I zoomed in a little bit too much. I gave it the information, it read all of the stuff, and it turned back saying, here are some of the issues. The overall verdict is that it's clear and everything's fine. Cross-page consistency, here are some issues. And they were minor things, like for example, I had mentioned on a couple of places that I have more than 13,000 newsletter subscribers when in fact the correct number is just below 13,000. So that was an issue, so on and so forth. And there were a couple of AI slop and brand voice inconsistencies that it suggested I do as well. So this was the final step in this pretty long process, and I see the questions in the chat about how long this whole thing took. Frankly, I holed up in my office. I had almost a week free to do all of that. If this is something that I had to do, by saying to do all of that was from the time I opened up that first initial chat and asked for the deep research documents, or even a step before that when I was thinking through which frameworks to include and how to approach this behemoth of a project, all the way to actually launching the new content on the website and my LinkedIn profile, it took about a week's worth of time. So let's call it 40-ish to 50-ish hours total. You can obviously spread that across several weeks if you're doing it as a side project on top of something else. But if you're working for a client, I mean, this is a pretty hefty project that used to take a few months to actually go through from start to finish. And now doing it in a single week is, wow. To me, this is like a huge improvement on efficiency. So even if it sounds like a lot, comparing it to the old way of doing things, which I've done for clients in the past, it used to take us anywhere between 3 weeks and 6 weeks to do something like this, depending on how much information we had already gathered and where we had to do follow-up interviews or stuff like that. So this is very good. Then I saw another question that on if I've seen progress and where I've seen the most progress. The first validation of all of this actually came last week and frankly, like, I feel a little bit embarrassed of saying this to all of you, but we're like a small community, so I can be frank with you. I've literally never had the situation where a client would come to me and from the initial call, they'd be like, I know exactly what you do. I know exactly what you can help me with. And I know exactly the type of service that I'm coming to ask from you. And that happened last week. I had an initial call with a new client and they wanted to work on a personal brand. They had seen the options on my website. They knew what the consulting and coaching package was. They knew what the personal brand sprint was. They came completely prepared. They requested an initial chat through my book intro call. And this was like the easiest first session that I've had with anyone. And this is already showing that people are actually going through the information here and it's not as abstract as it used to be and not as unclear as it used to be. So this is sort of the biggest win for me. Now I know we're coming up on time and since we started late, I can spend a few more minutes to answer some of the questions in the chat. I see there are many, and if you have any additional ones, ask them. But I wanted to end by saying I was so excited with how cool this whole process was that I wanted to build it into a structured approach that I can share with everyone. And this is what I'm doing at the end of the month. And I'm going to share that in the chat now. I am running a set of short cohort-based sprints, let's call them, because every one of them is just a 2-week thing. At the end of summer to get you ready to face Q4 with the most amount of clarity and systematized approach to building positioning and content as you need. I will be running 2 separate bits and you can get only the one that you want, or you can get the bundle at a discounted price. The positioning setup, I'm calling them summer setups because they're setting you up for Q4. And they are, every one of them is just 2 weeks. We have 4 live sessions within that. We have video on demand walkthroughs, and you will have access on even more detailed templates and prompts than the ones you'll get from today's session. So this isn't like a selling webinar. You are going to get some starting prompts and the messaging framework that I use, and I'm going to point you to the templates that I found helpful and I used that I shared here, Fletch PMM and April Dunford and Louis source. Obviously, I'm not going to give you access to the information that's reserved for people who are part of communities or who are paying for like a book or something like that, but I'll point you to where you can access that information. These positioning setups are going to be a way to bring that clarity to your own brand or to learn how to do this for your clients. It's a 2-week thing. It starts on August 24th, goes up to September 4th. We have 4 live sessions where you can come and present your work and ask questions, or not present your work and ask questions. And you walk away with a version 1 of your positioning and messaging. Then we have the content stack setup. Since you saw here how detailed my AI processes are, I wanted to teach people how to apply that same rigor to their content production work. And the content stack setup is just that. From September 7th to September 18th, we're going to see how to build an AI-based content production system in a way that feels uniquely yours. So this is going to be trained on existing writing or by building a brand voice guideline for yourself or for your brand, obviously, if you're working for a company. Then building the whole start to finish process of creating content for one of your main channels, including elements like the knowledge blocks that I mentioned here, building out scoring rubrics to make sure that your content stays at the quality that people expect from you, and so on and so forth. For these, you can join them live, and I think that that extra push of having the live sessions is going to be a welcome way to build all of this for the people who are thinking about, oh, this is something that I definitely need to do when I have the time for it. Well, if you join something like that in 2 weeks, you will find the time to do it, and you'll have it done once and it will be ready, and you'll be as happy as I am now with my new positioning. But even if you can't join some of the sessions live, you don't need to in order to get the full value. You're going to get the video walkthroughs, you're going to get all the templates and the prompts that I'm going to use. The live sessions are there mainly for individual feedback, so you're not going to lose anything if you can join us live. You have the pricing on that page, you have the details here. If you have any follow-up questions, shoot me a message. You'll all have my email from the recap of today's session. And if you want to ask any questions, if you're not sure if this is the right thing for you, I'll be able to answer that. Now the pitching ends. It was 4 minutes out of a 90-minute session, so I think that the quality to ask ratio is where I want it to be. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen and look at the questions, the ones that we don't have answered. And as always, thanks for all of you guys who are staying here till the end and being live. I'm very excited to have you and to continue that conversation. Right, I'm going from the start, looking at this really quickly. And as I'm going through the questions, I'd also really love to hear if there's anything that wasn't clear, if there's something that I glossed over that you were like, oh, wait, what's she even talking about? Ask it in the chat, please, because I'm sure that if this is something you're wondering about, someone else is wondering about it just as much, but is too afraid to ask or too shy to ask. So you'll be doing all of us a favor if you ask it. So do that. Okay. So I see here, even from the start of the session, Lubo mentioned that he's supporting a large food and beverage brand, which needs better positioning for younger segments. I hope that this has given you ideas on what tools to use and how to approach this. I think that same approach, even though I'm giving a lot of examples in B2B because that's mainly my bread and butter, that's the type of work I currently do most. I think this applies just as much for fast moving consumer goods and for consumer goods in general. You may not have such sophisticated mentions of value or functional value at least, but you will still be looking at the same issues around positioning as we are facing in B2B. Let me know, be it now in the chat or in a follow-up email, if there's anything specific to B2C brands that you're not like clearly seeing how what I was talking about now translates to B2C, and I'll be happy to dive into that a little bit more. I see here Sylvia coming for building a program for brand ambassadors in the company. Sylvia, I think that what I was talking about today is more oriented towards positioning, but I think the content side of it, especially the content production and bringing AI into that, is going to be especially relevant for you. I have another session and it's visible on YouTube. So I'm going to share that in the chat real quick in a sec, where I was talking more about the approach I have to building content at scale. And I think this can be particularly relevant to you. Just give me a sec. I'm going to be super quick in finding that one. And I think it's going to be beneficial to all of you as well, because, this is content that might interest you too. I'm sharing it in the chat now. And if you're watching a recording of this, obviously it's going to be in the notes too. A question here, I mentioned it at the start but didn't come back to it later. What's the software that I'm using for Cloud Code? It's called VS Code. So sharing that in the chat as well. It's just a wrapper that allows you to have all the information visible in one place. The main reason I'm using it, frankly, because I also tried using Cloud Code through the Cloud desktop app and through the web interface. The main reason I'm using this is that you can open files side to side and have more than one file open, and I find that super helpful. And I think that this is the main reason why I prefer VS Code to Cloud Code. There isn't anything else that I have from a functional perspective. Like, you don't have access to more things in it. It's just a better interface for me to use. Okay. Oh, a good question here. What's the reason to use synthetic audience personas? You probably saw that in my reference documentation in these general knowledge block files that I have. I had one called synthetic audience personas. How I use these is when I'm writing content, I have a step where I'm drafting the piece, and I'm obviously writing that whole piece, doing the back and forth with editing, with the help of Claude, and mainly editing by hand sometimes if I have to be 100% frank. But at the end, I feel like I need an extra set of eyes. And I've created this workflow where at the end of my own review process, I also let these synthetic personas read the piece and tell me what's unclear, what's not helpful, what their pushback is, what they're looking at, and being like, oh, BS that's not really something that comes from real life, what they're doubtful about. So every content piece I create first goes through my own review process, and then I use the synthetic personas to highlight any points where I might want to make any additional structural changes. So that's how I use them. Obviously, having a real life reader would be way better than using Claude for that, and I would very much advise against using synthetic personas for anything that's related to the type of research that I was telling you about today. This needs to come from real people, not synthetic ones. But if you're folding that into your content production process, like I am, I think that's the next best thing to actually having someone read through it and tell you how they feel about it. This is also something that I'm going to cover in that summer setup dedicated to building a content production AI stack. I see Sylvia asked here if I can share the AI slope blacklists. The version I'm currently using is already so specific to my own writing idiosyncrasies that I'm not sure that it's going to be helpful to someone else, but I'm going to give you a link to one that I've created in the past. Just let me find the exact version that I can share with you guys. Okay, it will take a second. So as I'm looking through it, I'm going to look at another question here. Can you help me with my repositioning? Which version of Canva is best suited for me during the summer setup? I think that's two questions, Ellie, if I'm reading those correctly. So, and I also assume that Canva here was a mistake and you actually meant Claude. Please correct me if I'm wrong. So I'm first going to answer that question, and then if your question was actually different, I'm going to answer that as well. So the summer setup would work with any AI that you are accustomed to using or that you are willing to learn to use. I'm, as you saw today, very much a Claude girly. So I will be using Claude and I'll show you how to do everything that I'm doing in Claude Code in the Claude Cowork interface, which is, you know, a little bit less scary if you're completely new to this world. I'm going to dedicate some time to run you through the technical setup, and our live sessions are also going to be dedicated very much to getting these technical elements out of the way so that you can actually do your work correctly. So don't worry about that. My preference would be for you to use Claude for this work, and I'll be most helpful to you if you use Claude. But even if you prefer something else, you can do that as well. So I think I found what I was looking for. Yes, there we go. This is a version of that blacklist that I've created in the past, and this is for my own work. It's going to be, it may say restricted for a sec, but it should be visible to all of you now. This is a version of that blacklist that I've created in the past. What I'd advise is to start off somewhere. Even using that and removing any mentions of Vasi in it is going to be a good place to start. And then whenever you see something that you're correcting repeatedly and it's just driving you mad, just tell your AI, add a rule for this in our shared blacklist, and it can directly write in the file for you and change that. So this is the best way to get going. Now on Ellie's other question on repositioning her personal brand, the summer setup is going to be applicable to both corporate brands and personal brands. A lot of the examples that I'll be giving throughout is with my own setup and my own process. So in a sense, it's very applicable to personal brands and you'll see examples directly visible there. I am running this currently with clients for their business-oriented brands and company brands and product brands, but I obviously can't share the work we're doing because of NDAs. So you'll be seeing a lot from my own setup as examples, but this same approach would be applicable whether you're building a personal brand or positioning a corporate brand. Okay. All right. I don't see anything else unanswered here. I'm also mindful of your time. I'm very glad to see that even 15 minutes after the end of this 90-minute session, you guys are still here. So that's awesome. I'm just going to end with another mention. If you want to hear more from me and you're still not subscribed to my newsletter, you will start receiving it together with the recap notes from today's session. So you get that there. And if for whatever reason you're watching this without having signed up through our Luma page first, I'm going to share the Luma link in the chat now. Just sign up to this, even though the event has actually ended or is currently ending in the next couple of minutes. Sign up here and you will also get access to the recording and the recap notes afterwards, along with some of the prompts that I've used, directions on the templates that I've been using, and all the other good stuff. I loved having you all today here, even with the bumpy technical start. So I hope to see more of you. I hope to see you guys in at least one or even better, both of the summer setup sprints that I'm doing. And if not, see you at the next free session that I'm running. More on that coming up in about 2 or 3 weeks time. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day or evening, wherever you are based, and see you all soon. Bye.